Well, hello there. I'm Liz.
And I am Scandal.
And let's review a book together.
Yay!
All right, so this is in reference to Made Things, and just the preview if you aren't familiar with our channel, which actually I myself, Liz, I performed.
Yes, you did. It was fabulous. It's called Made Things by Adrian Tchaikovsky.
I assume it's Tchaikovsky. I love it. I'm like, you assume no one else has the Tchaikovsky last name other than Tchaikovsky, but there it is. Anyway, in reference to this book, the book is like a novella. So
Right.
It's not a super long book. The preview is not super long either in reference to that. But I had a challenging time performing it, which has nothing to do with the book. The author was cleverer than I was ready for. Like the text is very playful and has a definite distinctive like cadence and like comedy beat to it that I wasn't prepared for, given that it's dealing with, well, it seems to be dealing with a relatively like serious subject matter, including like being a vagrant on the street, living a life as a thief, working in potentially being threatened with a workhouse or with like
police brutality,
that kind of thing. Anyway, so the author makes like very friendly, but also like makes light of without mocking many of these situations.
But also in that way, it makes it very accessible to a younger audience. It's one of the things that actually is very interesting if you ever read a lot of young adult versus adult, or even child fiction versus young adult and then to adult. It's actually very calm by comparison. It doesn't try to force an experience on you. It gets very light with the details.
Right. So this one actually had some really good places of that where it suggested very dark or very serious things, but it was indirect about them, and in such a way that if you didn't have context for it as a younger reader, it would have been really easy. There's one specific moment where our main character, Coppelia, is talking about the workhouses and also the danger of fleas, where fleas in your mattress can carry a lot of interesting things if, say, one of the incredibly magical persons living up in the castle comes down slumming it and they leave more than, a stain on the mattress, like a wet spot on the mattress and, essentially coin in someone's pocket. But it's like, it's a very simplistic statement and run into a much larger paragraph where they're talking about basically their own situation of living in, abject poverty, essentially, which is not quite that, because they did manage to, or she did manage to rent a room, but it was like at a high cost to herself and doing, of course, a lot of very shady things to get there. But it was interesting how it was not like, they don't talk about the workhouses being brothels and things like that. It's just there that an older reader would recognize.
Now, in the end, for me, I will say, I don't know if I was entirely interested in the book. Like, the idea, honestly, of basically automatons and puppets coming to life and running around and being active sounds really neat. I've liked some of those, but sometimes, like, I feel like there's a way the premise usually tends to run, because I've read one or two of them where they've got that sort of thing, where you've got, like, an automaton or robot or whatever it might be, or puppet character, and they seem like they don't want to go they all kind of start going down the same sort of, let's go down that magical, weird little path that Pinocchio set down years ago, except if you've ever read the original Pinocchio, it's a level of high dementia and, like, wildly, it's so creepy, actually. Pinocchio is terrible.
So is this creepy?
No, but I'm like, the thing is like, it all seems, what I'm saying is like, so if you read the original Pinocchio and then you go to Disney's Pinocchio, that's what feels like these, like, tiny kinds of books try to sort of go for. Except for then they turn around and they go, oh, because we're doing something more steampunk, right? Or, with automatons, so it tends to have more steampunk elements to it. It gets very sanitized. It feels more like a fairy tale more than anything else. I'm not saying those are bad stories, they just sort of get bland for me.
So you feel like it wasn't maybe as dark as it should have been? Is that what I'm getting?
It's just like, it doesn't feel like it was super engaging. Like, yeah, sure, it's cute and it's fun, but it wasn't...
It does feel like, I think I might be able to see where Scandal's going here with some of this in reference to... The book itself is setting up essentially an orphaned street rat who is a creative thief. And there are a lot of books that set up that way. And so...
particularly in steampunk, old Victorian, here's the one about the underdog. It's very rote, and I'm very kind of over it. Like, it's not that it's boring, necessarily, but it's just not
and
motivating.
Okay, I can see that.
Like,
I don't know if the book really drew me in that hard. Again, I had a hard time catching on to the author's language. Like, listening to my own performance and trying to figure it out after it, which we read our books blind, like a standard audiobook reader. You know,
yeah,
you just pick it up and you go in without really knowing much about it. And since we also can't consult a publishing house or an author about it, we have to make a lot of decisions on our own. You know, unless we're being hired and someone gives us direction,
right,
that kind of thing. Like, we do take book requests. So, you know, if you're like, hey, and then I know this about this book.
right,
And that's helpful. Or this is my book, let me tell you about the character.
right.
Which we've gotten one of those that we're going to put up, which is going to be kind of cool. But in reference to Made Things, I guess I would say that, like I said, I had a hard time catching on to the author's sort of wit until I'd been exposed to it for a while. So if I had just picked it up off a shelf, it probably wouldn't have caught with me immediately.
Mm-hmm.
But having sat with it a little while, I'm kind of curious where they wanted to go with it. Like, I've developed more of a rapport with the idea of the author,
Right.
based on the fact that they do have that sort of clever sort of hook in things and the way they speak about things, and their language is kind of fun.
Mm-hmm. And as again, like, I'm not saying that it's not boring. A lot of these books tend to be kind of clever, and they have cute little moments and nice little, like, nice cutting asides and these great little passive-aggressive comments. It sounds what I want to be like, it sounds very English, basically. But the thing is it sounds very much like it's very secure in itself. But also, again, it's that weird sort of I'm so comfortable kind of thing that it doesn't necessarily challenge you a lot, and it feeds into its own sort of tropes associated with the type of type of fiction that it is.
I suppose, yeah, I didn't get emotionally invested in the lead really quickly. I was curious about the environment and what was happening.
That one, the plot's fascinating, but the characters are kind of...
But
they're sort of like vehicles for the main story, which is kind of...
At least in the first chapter, there wasn't a lot to draw me into Coppelia's story. On the other hand, she seems very disconnected from her own emotional space. She's not a really emotional character at this point. She's very much in, like,
survival mode.
Snarky survival mode.
Yeah.
Yeah, like, I will defend myself with snark as opposed to vulnerability.
I'm a thief! Can't you tell?
A thief.
A thief.
And so I guess what made me most interested in this book is going, is it going to go sinister or not? Because Coppelia makes a really good point that while she's working with these little automatons, you know, dolls, creatures, animates, whatever they are, she doesn't even know that she doesn't know what their purposes are. And there are these unknown little beings in her world, and they come to work with her, and they've made it clear that she's the only person that knows they exist. And they're recruiting and increasing their ranks. So there's a level of, like, darkness suggested at the beginning of the book that's potential, where she is uncomfortable to some degree living with these little beings, or she doesn't really understand their agenda, but they've made a deal together for survival, because again, abject poverty.
Right.
And they are helping her survive for their own purposes and ends. And so that made me very curious.
Right. Again, like, the setup is again where I keep going, like, the plot sounds interesting. Your characters aren't really, to me, quite cutting it, which is sad to me. I'm like, why wouldn't you go? I don't know. Like, how would you make basically books like this more accessible? But that's another thing for later. It really.
I say, but that is to each individual person, whether or not a character or an experience is accessible to you. Anyway, so that was generally my impression. Like, I liked the author's prose. I thought their approach for something that is maybe fairly standard, was distinctive enough in the sound and the wording that it was kind of cool. And then not knowing whether this was going to go like really dark or something hopeful, like not really being able to pick out the tone of it, but nonetheless making it curious where the character herself was curious.
Right.
That right as you get to the end of the preview is the place what kind of starts to hook me.
Right.
Anyway.
And yeah, well, that for me, that was pretty much it. But so I guess thanks for joining us, guys. We will see you around. If you like any of our other content, please like, comment, and review if you like our stuff.
Subscribing would be
Please feel free
great.
to subscribe. We also have a Patreon if you want to support us. And yeah, enjoy your day. I have been Scandal.
And I have been Lies. And take care of yourselves out there. Bye!